Julian, want to go ahead and do the recording in progress? Okay, there we go.
Got it.
Hey, so welcome everybody to the first full day of summer, right? I had my meeting with my assistant Summer Solstice yesterday, and it was great. And we were in the middle of a meeting called the National Whole Blood Summit that was started several years ago, and it's been an annual event, if I believe correctly, and it's hosted by STRAC, which is the South Texas Regional Advisory Council. And I'm going to have their executive director talk to you just for a second and give you a little bit of a an overview of that. And then the person who runs the conference, Dr. Don Jenkins, who's on with us every week, will also be joining us and give us a little bit of perspective on the summit. And so my intention is to have some of the experts in the room that were actually there, give them what did I get out of this? What did I learn from this conference? And so we wanted to pass it on to you and make a special session here today. So that's where we're going with that. And so with that, let's turn it over to Eric Epley, who's the Executive Director of STRAC. Go ahead, Eric.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Epley. I'm the director here at STRAC, and we're a 501c3. We're part of the Texas Trauma System. There are 22 RACs in Texas. I'm the one in San Antonio. We have 63 hospitals, 70 EMS agencies. We have a lot of projects. Our Regional Whole Blood project is probably the one you guys are most familiar with. We have several others. We also organize the Emergency Medical Task Force for the state of Texas, which is our disaster response stuff and what's been gearing up for the last couple of days. And we had a little bit of a storm. So welcome. We're happy to host this and looking forward to the conversation.
And you hosted this meeting over at one of the local hotels here, which was really a nice setup resort for people who want to come in the future.
Yeah.
And that's good. And then how many attendees about did you have?
We had 220 attendees to the National Whole Blood Summit, and we'd love to have everybody from Eagles come next year. We're going to try to coordinate with Dr. Pepe for the dates and make sure that's in one of your lull periods. You guys do a lot of meeting and a lot of traveling, so we're going to try to make sure our National Whole Blood Summit is conducive to y'all's travel schedule as well. I hope we can do that.
And so a person that all of us know pretty well now has been just a great leader in this field of whole blood administration is Dr. Don Jenkins out of University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. And the professor basically ran this meeting in a sense, got it all started, gave us all our marching orders, and maybe he can tell us a little bit about what he had in mind as he was doing it. Does he need this little thing here? Okay.
So thanks, Paul, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Eagles from San Antonio. We had a great day yesterday. We assembled what we thought were some of the world's experts in whole blood. This included a number of folks from the blood side of the equation, from the AABB. There's people there that work for the FDA. We had representation from multiple blood suppliers. We even had one of their speak from Vitalant. A whole number of EMS folks. And geez, how many Eagles spoke yesterday? Like 5?
Yeah, 5 or 6. I think. Yep.
Yeah, five or six Eagles on the docket. So it was a good meeting. We talked at first about sort of the history of where we came from this meeting in 2019 to today, what was happening today. We looked at some of the progress and success that's been seen in the Whole Blood Academy. Randy Schaefer updated us on the current map of where whole blood is. We heard from her and John Kramer on some of the issues related to reimbursement and where those efforts are headed and what's still needed. And then we had a great session on the future and looking at the future topics to include things like obviously research, but also creation of a registry for this. We had Jeff Kirby from the American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma here to do that. Some other folks that were involved included Andre Kapp, who's a hematologist in the big blood world. Jen Gurney was here from the military as well. Phil Spinella, John Holka, and I think it was a pretty outstanding venue. Lots of discussion. We reserved about 40 minutes for discussion at the end. We finished actually a few minutes early on the main, lecture set. And then we had to kind of shut down, the discussion period, because we ran into the, into the end of the conference. We moved it out into the foyer where, there were things like, well, Paul brought some leftover wine from that session, that we had for networking, there. And so, I'm really curious to hear from the folks that are assembled here today who attended that, especially what things kind of came out of, that networking opportunity during the breaks and, over the dinner, last night. So thanks, Paul, for the opportunity to, talk about that.
Well, thank you for putting this thing on in the first place, and, 'cause it took a little work, and, Eric's people here, such as Tracy Rose, were just fantastic making this all happen. All right, so, before we go into our roundabout here in terms of what did I take away from this, I wanted to sort of make sure if there's anybody on that has to get off early, let me know, and I'll make sure we'll get a report from you quickly. Sandy Schneider, let me just introduce everybody. Everybody knows Sandy Schneider has been on with us for years, and but she was now, I have to give her condolences, been appointed the interim executive director of the American College of Emergency Physicians, but I already hear you're doing great things. That's the feedback I've been getting. I got a guy named Jeff Goodlow in the room with me here as well, and saying just great things about you and what you've been doing. So good on you is all I can say, and I hope that your husband's doing well as well. So anything to report to us, Sandy, before we go on?
Yeah, so first, let me apologize for not making it to the Eagles this year. My schedule just didn't allow it, and my husband had just had surgery. And at his age, even though he was doing well, his doc and I both thought it was probably better that I stayed at home, and of course, he didn't need me in the least, except to make dinner and the usual thing. So it turned out to be just fine. I'm glad Jeff is there because I'm going to rely on him. I just wanted to pop on quickly. Yeah, I have been appointed interim executive director, or now I'm an IED. And I'm trying not to.
As opposed to an AED, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying not to be too explosive, but we have had some changes there. I do want to let you know that I just turned the page. Oh, here we go. I do want to let you know that we do have this little meeting coming up in Las Vegas where the Eagles are going to be there. So please make your reservations, make them early. And I also wanted to let you know that I'm going to be relying on Jeff and Nick Cozy to keep me abreast of what's going on with the whole blood, and if there's anything that ACEP can do to help that move forward. And finally, I just really came on to thank you all for helping us get through EMS week this past year. I know it's been a couple of weeks since that happened, and you're probably like, wait, she's really behind. The answer is yes, she's really behind. But it was a great success. We did it really on a very short time frame, but next year will be better. So anyhow, I'm happy to answer any questions about what's going on at ACEP, but I'm probably not sure I even know.
Okay, got it. Okay, Sandy, but it was just great seeing you, and we did miss you, but you had really good representation there for your group, and George was there. George was at the meeting here with us as well yesterday, just so you're aware. Okay.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
Get Rick's boots there.
I didn't hear that. Say that again.
He said George is filling Rick's boots very well.
Oh yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, it's been great having us here. And so let's then move on to anybody else have any issues about having to get off early and all that? And if not, I'll move ahead with our special discussion today that we're going to have. So in the room are many of the people that were the experts, and we're just glad we were all here gathered for this kind of a special approach today. And so I think I'm just going to do it kind of just arbitrarily in a kind of a round robin, moving around this various directions. And then most of you have become familiar with Randy Schaefer. Dr. Schaefer has been terrific, person joining us, keeping us abreast about what's happening around the world and where, things are going on. And she's been a terrific consultant for everyone as well, and helped us out with the Spark Academy last week in Florida as well. And but I wanted to say now, we know the things that you've been teaching us. I want to know, what did we teach you yesterday? Now, should I pass this around? Is that what I'm doing?
No, I think so.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So Randy, why don't you see, what did you take away that was kind of new, you think?
I think I was pleased with the progress. I had the privilege of being part of the very first Whole Blood Summit in watching how far we've come, since those days. And we still have a lot of work to do. I was glad AAB.
Let me interrupt you for just a second. So is everybody hearing her okay? Anybody who's out there, you hearing her okay?
Some thumbs up, yep.
Okay, good, all right.
It's a little low, but we
great.
can hear her.
Okay.
So just, yes.
Hello, Peter. I'm sorry you couldn't make it. So again, a lot of progress from 2019, from the first summit to now. It was great to have more blood center involvement. Afterwards, AABB, we are just continuing to slowly chip away at, and had the chance to talk with the executive director, who really wants to get involved in knowing where the EMS agencies are, so that way they can start sharing knowledge with their blood centers about working together. That's good. Always steps forward. For every 2 steps back with the blood center, sometimes we get a big step forward.
Okay. And Dr. Goodlow, anything you would say was a good takeaway from you, or a couple takeaways anyways?
Yeah, it was an outstanding meeting yesterday. I really think the takeaway from a conference room full of champions for whole blood was underscoring both the clinical benefits of this. There continues to be a building, cache of knowledge. And I also think that there were many presentations that really underscored the responsible stewardship of this. And so, we hit upon the challenges of supply of whole blood, particularly when we're thinking about statewide, multi-state region, certainly nationwide networks of whole blood for these patients that desperately need it. Part of that supply-demand equation is that we very responsibly and strategically build these networks so that we don't overbuild and very paradoxically wind up wasting a scarce resource. So I thought there were so many takeaways yesterday, but I would put the 2 big ones for me in those camps. It's a very careful balancing of our energies to make sure that we don't overbuild in the process of continuing to encourage other systems to join us.
Jeff, one of the things I heard was that, we had some of the experts, they were saying, I guess if we had the theoretical ultimate dream was to have whole blood on every ambulance out there, that would be an outrageous supply that we would need, correct?
Right, and I thought it was, to Dr. Jenkins' wisdom and others planning this meeting, I thought it was just incredible to have our colleagues from the blood banking side of things, because so much of what we think about in the day-to-day medical oversight of EMS systems, it's just a different spectrum of issues than our colleagues in the blood banking industry, think of, as well as some of our clinical colleagues that have really drilled down on the basic science, if you will, of the benefits of whole blood and alternatives. And so I was really intrigued by as much of the discussion that centered around liquid plasma or dried plasma. I mean, there's just so many things that I think we are able to leverage out of the experience of our military colleagues and how we can better apply that to civilian medicine in the United States. You can build a whole career just based on this part of EMS to come. It's fascinating.
So I'm going to pitch it to Dr. Jenkins, but one of the things I took away is that it probably is not totally feasible to have the blood on every ambulance, and then especially if you're in far forward conditions in a rural area or whatever, and sustain that. But there are other things we can do in the meantime, whether it's TXA or plasma or whatever, and those are some of the takeaways I had, quite frankly, is that we need to be thinking that way. We could put those things on every ambulance, et cetera. Dr. Jenkins?
Yeah, so I was going to respond to something that Jeff said. Both Randy and Eric Bank, who you can't see, he's hiding in the back of the room back there, sat in with the AABB as we drafted these pre-hospital guidelines. We gathered up with them in the sort of the after party. They were, all congregated, and we chatted with them, and they had the obverse to say what you just said, which is that their eyes were opened to the needs of EMS. by being there, by being present, by participating in the conversations, hearing those needs, and now all of a sudden it seemed to me like all that time we spent writing those guidelines, it clicked, like what we were doing and why this was so different, a thing, and why we needed to have our own independent guidelines for them. They were thrilled to have been there.
I know, and essentially, I love what CJ's comment about their personality and thinking process of a blood banker from EMS is like so almost at an extreme, right? And so the fact that they were really, getting in there with us is really what it's all about. So that was really cool. Yeah, go ahead. There's a hand up. Yeah, is that you? Or?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's Peter.
yeah, Peter, I'll come to you in a second. I was going to get a comment from David Miramontes.
So I think my takeaway, so I was there just to learn and to get exposed. I think the biggest thing I took away from this is the system of care. And that's what you have to build. And if you can't do it yourself, do it with your friends. And the system of care is the donors. So you have to have, like we have, the Heroes in Arms. You have to have a donor base that's energized, that's connected, that when they answer the text to come give blood. You need a blood bank that is engaged, that can help you along your path to do blood. You need the providers that are giving the blood. And let's say you have a small agency. Get with your friends. You do mutual aid on fires every day. You can do mutual aid for blood. So that could be multiple counties coming together with one EMS captain or response vehicle that can give blood to multiple counties. So the logistics is better. It takes the EMS administration. Right now, we have to pay for it. So that's another issue. And then the last part is the hospitals. You have to have a system of care where someone's going to burn the blood. That is after 14 days or whatever the interval is that you have it out in EMS, that blood, that precious resource, is going to be used before its expiration. And that is engaging the hospitals. And that's not just trauma. That's OB. That's cardiovascular surgery. That's the vascular surgeons. It's all the doctors in the hospital that use blood. They have to flip their script. Instead of using component therapy, to use that whole blood instead.
Yeah.
It's better anyway for their patients. So it's all that system of care is the thing that I took away, and how we have to promote that in the process.
Peter, you had a question?
Yes, I do. First of all,
Yes.
hello everybody, and Paul, thanks for having me on here. I have a couple comments, and then I have a question for everybody. So, I was able to join in, remotely yesterday, and I was really blown away. Really, the depth that you guys went yesterday, looking at the regulatory aspect, the research aspect, and then the on-the-ground aspect. I learned so much. I was taking a lot of notes. Here's my question for everybody, and it's only because all the agencies that are the little agencies out there trying to get a blood program started, many of them worry about the wastage. And yesterday the guy from UPenn said that they wasted 159 units. What is the amount of wastage that we should let them know to expect? Not to scare them to say 1 unit of waste is too much, because I don't agree with that. If you're a new agency that doesn't have all the hooper and hollering that everyone else has, how much are you okay to be wasted early on until you can get the swapping out going? What is that over triage rate?
Yeah. Let's have our boss address that before we hear from other commentaries. Go ahead.
Yep. So the experience in most EMS agencies starting up and hospitals starting up is the waste is high. The waste is in the teens to 20 on a usual basis. And as they gain experience,
Can I interrupt you for a second? You said teens to twenties, what, percent? Percent. Okay, got it.
Percent.
Okay.
So a wastage in that ballpark. And as they gain experience and they gain recipient populations because they gain the knowledge, that number goes down. Optimally, what the blood banks would operate on would be a 5% waste. The majority of the programs that we've talked to are sitting at like 2.5% and lower waste. And so there's some growing pains in the beginning. What Jeremy Cannon was talking about at Penn is that they really have not engaged their other surgical disciplines nor their obstetricians. And so instead of making that blood be useful to them, they have decided that they don't want it and they would prefer to throw it in the trash, which is it gives you an awful feeling deep in your gut that would be the approach. It's going to take them more time, and they haven't managed that inventory the way that they should have probably. That's what Jeremy will tell you, is that they need less until they get the more buy-in, from the rest of the places, the surgeons, as Dave was saying.
And Dave, I think, CJ, who I was hoping to get on with us today, had a nice little thing and showed that your wastage was pretty high at first, and then it started going way down. Is that correct? Where are you?
Correct.
You're in the 20% range, and now you're down to what?
Oh, less than 2% now.
Yeah, okay. All right, so, let's pop it over then next to Eric, if you don't mind. We go on, and then Eric, of course, thank, in Harris County would, what's that?
We walked in.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Eric, I'll do it live.
I got
Yeah. So Eric was like one of the first people to start introducing, blood products into the streets, and, you wanna address that question real quickly, and then tell us what you took away, something new.
So the first thing I'll say is just the initial growth from being the guy on the island
Yeah,
yesterday is astronomical, but just the growth from
Yeah.
October
yeah,
to yesterday is astronomical. And seeing states like Colorado, North Carolina, and getting to listen to folks and seeing where we're starting to match up is really pretty incredible. I think for me, the key takeaways are flexibility, right? Whole blood is not always available. Whole blood's the greatest choice we could come in. It's the perfect product, right? It's got everything in it. It's in one bag. It's easy to carry, but we have to be a little bit flexible because it's not always available. I think you see some of the usage. I think we're still really tight sometimes on usage. I know in our system, when we go back and look at CQI, we have a tremendous underutilization and a very little overutilization. And I think that, and it seems like the typical progression is we start with, 15 and above male patients for trauma, then we add in female patients, and then medicine patients come along. Obviously, there's not a bigger rock star on the planet than Izzy to cheer for children, and Dr. Antebi, who's spent his career, working with us on pediatrics, and to see those start to come around and see people start there instead of starting with just little blocks. You have to crawl, walk, run. We know that process. So I think that, and then kind of what Dr. Jenkins was talking about is that the AABB yesterday, like the light switch went off.
yeah,
That, this is why you guys fought so hard. And when I say fought, we weren't like arm wrestling or anything.
Yeah.
But, there's a few terse moments, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, they really could see that we were trying to, first and foremost, which is their main mission in life, is be good stewards of blood supply.
yeah.
And help.
Their term for that was, "You're not a bunch of cowboys."
Yeah.
I think is what they said.
And then we sort of went whoopee and put our laughing.
Bang, bang.
Except for Charlie,
Yeah.
who got that from you. But, yeah, I think that, and then again, seeing the military reaction and having I've been very fortunate to work with Colonel Gurney and the folks at JTS and Dr. Holcomb, and seeing the alignment of military medicine and civilian medicine, and seeing that 2016 zero preventable deaths paper keep coming up and trying to not only eliminate the U.S. curve, but also eliminate the military curve, right? So we don't start out with a high number of deaths and then we reduce that, where the military is trying to stay at readiness, where we're all learning from each other.
Yeah. So, and one of the things that you brought up a good point is that, we noticed that there are some, let's say, the issues that many places start with just focused on trauma, but as Dave pointed out, there's a large percentage of these cases are medical, and I think the idea of Izzy being perfect was not just because we usually, even those who are doing medical, like GI and OB and whatever, is that to bring up the tonsillectomy in a young child,
Yeah.
it's just great to really drive it home, so I thought that was an different. The other thing is that, that I think we're underutilizing it, that was one of the comments I made, was that that there are people, we have very strict criteria about where we're gonna use it, because we're trying to be responsible, but there are probably a lot more people that should be getting the blood, as well. And, the criteria, and I think Dr. Jenkins, just before I get over to Eric, Dr. Jenkins, you were talking about that in the future, some of your discussions are gonna involve, like, how you do liberalize those criteria or the triage. I think that's what you were talking about. Is that correct?
Exactly right, Paul, and I took a piece of that from your presentation, as I've got a list of the things that we plan to discuss in the next summit, and get prepared for the next year. And that's one of those things, is to refine and hone those criteria. That's gonna help the blood producers to get on board with this, I think, because they're gonna see that we're trying to make a standard, and it's not each to them. You need individualized medicine, but to a point, as in that Seagulls meeting that they were just having, right? Give us an example protocol, and we'll work from those basics. That would be an ideal thing to come up with, and use the experience, the expertise of Eagles that help us to do that. You had great example that you presented yesterday on that. So.
Like what? What do you mean, great?
So it was your, the old person with the normal blood pressure, sort of a thing, or the kid with abnormal.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so, that's the whole point. We may just need to liberalize and say we we not give more people, because it's not just the blood pressure of 75, there's a lot more to it. And people could have heart rates of 70 because they're crashing, or they're on, some kind of beta blocker, et cetera. So I think that's what you're getting at. So, okay, so then let's go ahead. Eric, you've been hosting this thing for a while, and you guys have been helping out with organizing this thing and making it happen down here in South Texas. Now, what did you learn anything new yourself yesterday?
I learned a ton.
Okay.
Thank you for attending and talking and being part of the panelists, and some of you guys in the room did a great job. All you guys did a great job.
Thanks for recognizing the others.
One of the things I took away, they talked to the scientists, really focused two sessions on research.
Yeah.
And we need more data. And I agree with that. And we need to be pursuing, a randomized controlled trial. That's great. But that's going to take us 15 years. And we don't have to have it, that we can't wait that long to change practice for 15 years to do from start to finish. And so it's sort of a both approach. We need to use the pretty good data we have right now and be mindful about the long term with, an RCT. But Phil Spinella said, I think the smartest thing I think I've heard, maybe I heard yesterday, is, we gave 400,000 units. We have 400,000 units of whole blood in World War II. And it was the standard of care for 100 years. And then in the 70s, we just changed to trauma resuscitation with component with almost no data. And now to go back to what we did for 100 years, we have to have an RCT. It's like, whoa, no. So I really, that was a great line. I'm a huge proponent, as most of you guys know, about the rotation center concept. I mean, it's the best way to be a good steward. You need a champion trauma surgeon at a busy trauma center. If you have a champion who believes in whole blood, has seen it work, they will drive utilization of the blood, and then you keep it out for 2 weeks, bring it to them for 3 weeks, let them use it. And then when we started our system, we had about 12 units on helicopters only. And, 10 months later, we added San Antonio EMS, and that was another 6 units, and that went to 8 later. And we were only at 12 or 20 units in the field. Today, we're at 56, but that took 6 years in very increments, and we drove that off of the wastage percentage. We just kept looking at wastage, and when you could use a little bit more and it's dropping, we're like, oh, okay, time to add 2 more units. Who gets it? And in the meetings we would have with our EMS directors, we just figured out who, if Converse, which is a suburb of San Antonio, or Uvalde, like those guys are both ready to go. They've both been trained. They've both got their equipment. They're both committed. Hey guys, where do we think that blood ought to go? Well, probably in Uvalde. That's the best place. And so we've been very careful about adding people along the way. The other big thing, the final thing I'll talk about, is walking blood bank. And Norway has a great model. We've kind of worked on that here with South Texas Blood and Tissue. Walking blood bank is feasible. We need to be doing it. I think that's something we can bring, especially to our rural colleagues. They had the shooting in Maine, and Maine was decimated for blood by one shooting. Like that 9 people. I believe if we could establish walking blood bank processes in most locations that would build statewide resiliency. And honestly, I listened to the strategic blood supply discussion in DC about 2 months ago. It's really frightening if we have a radiological event or some other thing that's going to draw big blood requirements. Walking blood banks in local communities would be like an upside down wedding cake. So we have this resiliency at the local level, and that would go to regional and state level, and then our national, I'm a U.S. citizen first, I'm a Texan second, and I'm a San Antonian third, right? And I think we need to be thinking in that realm.
Yeah, we're all looking incredulously, but please go ahead.
You're a Texan first, come on.
I don't have CJ's Texas U.S. slide, so that was my takeaway. I don't know where he wanted to go next, probably Dave.
So I think the walking blood bank, to go back to that, so that walking blood bank is a military term. In the civilian word, it should be get the text, drive to the blood collector, give your blood. And I don't know, we have to come up with a new term for that. Drive to the blood collection point when your pager goes off and give your blood quickly. And we have some of that here in South Texas with the Heroes in Arms program, where they do respond. And you have to develop that in your community. Start with your cops and firefighters because they are invested in their blood collection process. And that's a way to really build that base.
But
So
you
Dave,
really
oh,
need,
go ahead.
you really need to work with the blood community for them to be, if you're gonna make it work, they have to be able to scale up to receive those donors and process the donations.
One of the things, I agree with
That is
you.
a real concern that they have.
I agree. So what we've done here, we have, I think there's 9 pilot remote sites for South Texas Blood and Tissues they collect. And what we've asked our Heroes in Arms donors is simply, if we paid you, we need you to respond to where you normally give blood, go to the place at, Fredericksburg Road, go to that location and give their unit of blood. And then the fire department has squads, their first responder vehicles, their pickup trucks, and they can run and go pick up the warm blood, and we can run it back. And we'll do post-administration testing. But our theory is we're going to try to take blood in a warm walking blood bank moment from donors that have given in the last 6 months. If they've given, twice in the last 6 months, their blood is probably okay. We're going to do post-administration testing, obviously, right? But I think that's a really deliberate and thoughtful way to ensure that it's not just some heroin addict that's coming off the street that's going to give us blood, and we're going to run and stick it in somebody.
But if there were 2 major concerns that I have heard repeated at this meeting from the blood community, one is the demand is going to increase and we're not going to be able to meet the supply. If we increase the supply, we need to ramp up our processing capabilities to be able to handle that. So, they're concerned on both ends.
Many trauma centers actually do collect blood now. So 40% of Dawn's blood is collected at University Hospital. And why do they do that? Because it saves money.
Yeah.
It's dirt cheap to collect it than to buy it. So if you can have our trauma centers, they're not already collecting blood, at least be able to do it for the walking blood bank in the urban model.
And some of the model of that though also needs to be, the blood collectors need to be, this is an emergent situation, flexible. I can bring in whoever we can get to draw blood. We have tons of paramedics that have the skill, need to have you draw some blood with this, put in the bag. If they're already participating in a walking blood bank program, they know how. But now it's gonna be, okay, yes, there will be outside of the normal blood bank operation, if you mobilize that for, an acute, especially regional or national issue.
Learning their culture, the blood banking community,
Critical.
they're librarians. It's like the other end of the world from us. And so I think that's
what CJ said,
They make librarians look like.
personality.
rock stars.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's
No.
like-
Yeah. Yeah, but before I go to it, all right, I'll go to Peter then. Where is it? I didn't see the question come up here. I apologize.
Yeah. No. I just have a quick clarification comment for Eric, because I love what you just said and I agree with you. But my clarification question is this walking blood bank concept meant to be for the emergent situation happening now, or is it to just increase the stores? And what do you expect that turnaround time to be from the time that I hold out my arm until that blood is ready for delivery into the patient?
So when I think about the word walking blood bank, I think we've had an MCI, and we have a big, this is not for day-to-day supply, but those same people would be part of the day-to-day supply chain. They would be donating on their regular rhythm. But when we call them because we've had another Uvalde shooting, because we've had a Sutherland Springs shooting, we've had we need a lot of blood quickly. Jen Gurney's looked at the data and thinks it's about 4 units per patient. If you look at the Norway, she looked at 4 or 5 in her talk, and she said if you just use 4 units per person, that will cover the guy who's going to get 60 units, and 5 or 6 that don't get any or whatever. But
You have to have exhausted the blood supply.
Right. But the key there is it would be hours, Peter. We would be driving it literally from the site we're drawing it at and go into the hospital. It's warm blood. And that was another thing, the military people, I don't know anybody else who's given warm, fresh whole blood. And they said if you think cold stored is a great opportunity, wait till you do warm. It's magic. It's amazing. So that was interesting to me as well.
From that position, we're looking at operationalizing in Colorado right from the start. We're going to have, by weather, by geography, by traffic patterns, instances where our system cannot deliver cold stored whole blood in a reasonable time frame. But we can deliver a pre-screened volunteer stuffed full of warm blood, and then basically get it out, immediately transfuse it right then.
So I'm sorry that I had to leave. I didn't know if we had gone to John or Scott yet.
I'm still up.
But one thing I want to go off protocol for just a second. And one of the things, since you mentioned Colorado, when you talk about wasting, I just wanted to go over and talk to Stein about his model, okay?
Yep.
I think that'd be just worthwhile as a nice little tangent for a second.
Absolutely.
Hey, Stein, you're there, and can you tell us a little bit about your model, about how you're handling your blood supply? Are you there, Stein?
I was there earlier.
Yeah. Maybe he has to unmute himself, right? Hey, Stein Bronski, are you there? If not, well, I'm trying to see if I can see his name there. Either way, but go ahead.
Yeah, I can give at least a peripheral version.
Okay, so Scott Brandy from Colorado will give a brief version of it.
Well, of course, second to Stein, but
Yeah.
from that, those guys basically went online April 22, very similar to the San Antonio model. They're basically, first couple of units are out in the field, also keeping this. We have kind of kept in Colorado, the overall goal is to make it under 3% from the start.
Yeah.
If we do, it's great. If we don't, that's still the goal of when people say, okay, when we talk about minimizing waste, what is that number? Somewhat to Peter's question, the goal is to be at 3% or under. And right now, they're off to a great start, but part of that is they are moving very incrementally in this same concept. The overall 2 processes to guide this are what is our waste and how much can our hospital absorb to minimize that waste. And then beyond that, we'll fill up to that level. They've had very good success so far.
You mean Colorado Springs?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hey, Stein, are you there? I see your name on there. Can you unmute and talk to us? Or if we can get him on. If not, okay, he must be distracted with something else. So, maybe he's here now. Stein, are you there? Nope, still not there.
I am, sorry, having a hard time with the buttons.
We're gonna get buttoned down here, so go ahead and we're just asking about how your model is gonna work in terms of resupplying blood, what's gonna cost you.
Yeah, so the model that we're using right now, and we're about 3 weeks in, and just over, I think just around a dozen units of blood used, is that the EMS agency, our fire department, obtains the blood from the University Hospital blood bank, and then when they pay for it, and then when it's used, if the patient arrives back at the university, which is about, at least just by our numbers, about 60% of patients, then the hospital can charge for that blood because it came from their blood bank. And so,
but you're saying charge, but they're charging not you, they're charging the patient, correct?
That is correct. That's correct.
Okay, go ahead.
And so the only way we can do that is if the patient is returned to that hospital. Now, we're very,
Yeah.
very careful because we don't want to be, involved in any Stark violations or anything like that.
Yeah.
That we do not change our trauma destinations or our medical destinations. And so we watch very, very carefully that every patient that is delivered to a hospital is being delivered to the closest appropriate hospital, regardless if blood is given or not. So if the blood happens to arrive at, the Common Spirit Hospital, then that blood cannot be charged to the patient. But if they arrive at the university, the blood can be charged. And so far, it seems to be working.
Okay, got it. I'm sorry for the digression. It just seemed to be appropriate for the time, and just that's an interesting model, and I hope a lot of other people are going to try to adopt that as well, because that would sure solve some of our problems. So let's then move on, get back on the protocol. We're going to go to John Kramer, who, of course, is not only one of our leaders in this arena in terms of a national initiative to get this thing widespread, et cetera, it being in the recovered federalist mode, right? and give us his update about what, we know what you've done for us, John. It's been incredible, but tell us what you took away from the meeting yesterday. I think we all are saying the blood banking is a big part of it, right? So, but anything else?
Yeah, I mean, all of the discussions were fabulous, and it was really a very impressive learning opportunity. I think there are three things that struck me. One is, as everybody has talked about already, it's got to be a very collaborative, cooperative, multidisciplinary initiative. As I was listening to folks, there are a lot of concepts that have to be met. I mean, you need to do certain things. The way in which various programs do those varies a little bit and fits the needs of the area, which is why, in my mind, the state coalitions are critical. We can talk about, at a national level, we can talk about what needs to be done, but states need to come together and address their unique state issues, which they can do much more easily. There will subsequently be local issues that need to be addressed. But from my perspective, having state coalitions work to bring all the state partners together is just absolutely critical. You all have touched on the component therapy, and everybody agrees that whole blood is the ideal resuscitative fluid. Having said that, in the foreseeable future, we're not going to have whole blood. So flexibility that Eric alluded to, you've got to be able to accept whole blood if you can get it, red cells if that's the option. If you're, and I say this euphemistically, if you're stuck with plasma, that's okay, because plasma is still a critical part of hypovolemic shock resuscitation. The other thing I'll mention, folks have talked about the AABB standard or guidance that are out for comment period right now. We've got to compliment Randy and Don and Eric and John Holcomb that were on that working group to help make it realistic to the EMS environment, because as folks have already alluded to, if it were up to the, and again, this is not an indictment, it's a reflection of reality. If it were up to the blood bank community, they would be very difficult to achieve in the EMS environment. Having said that, and I mentioned this yesterday, I think it's a real compliment to the folks in the EMS community, the 158 now that we know about, that have developed programs, because they have developed their programs in such a way that, with a couple of exceptions, they meet what will likely be the AABB guidance requirements for programs. So it's not onerous for EMS agencies to develop these programs, be compliant with appropriate regulations and requirements, and satisfy the concerns that the blood community has about, I was one of the ones that reflected, historically, the blood community viewed EMS as the Wild West and paramedics as cowboys. And they have realized very quickly that programs can establish the storage requirements and the maintenance requirements and address the documentation issues and address the chain of following the blood units throughout. So, the EMS community to date has been very successful, I think, in convincing the blood bank community that this makes sense and EMS can do it, and it's not going to jeopardize the blood supply in the country.
Yeah.
Can I add one comment really quick?
No.
So, yes, please. Just remind
Yeah,
me.
please.
So the AABB guidelines, you may be approached by the AABB to get accredited as in the blood world, but accreditation is not required. So that was something that we need to make perfectly clear, that the guidelines you can follow, but you are not required, recommended, no heavy foot stomp. That was one of our discussions in the room, that you suggest you get accredited. I just want to make sure that that's clear, because the AABB was interested in getting a hold of.
But they will take your donation.
But they will take your money.
Yes.
They will take your money.
I'm gonna have some specific questions for everybody in just a second, and we'll see who's gonna address, but first, let's go to Scott, Randy, and then Scott, you've helped develop a coalition in Colorado, but, so what did you take away from this?
I mean, most of it's been covered already, and the
Yeah.
biggest single distinctions I think we were looking there is the science is reasonably well established. What was presented to us on the questions of leukoreduction versus non,
That's what I was gonna ask about, yeah.
yeah, well, we know they both work.
Yeah,
We know beyond that, it's a compromise depending, and the problem is you're compromising with a leukoreduced product. We reduce some of the transfusion side effects. That makes the blood bankers very happy, because that risk reduction is their world. The flip side is you can extend it to twice as many facilities if you're using a 35-day non-leukoreduced. So we have the medical issue on one side, we've got an equity and distribution issue as the other half of that equation to balance it against.
but the impression I got was that the reaction, you could get it, but it was pretty rare, wasn't it?
That's certainly a big issue at the moment, and especially if one of your suppliers is.
It doesn't need treatment in most cases.
Right, that's what I was gonna say, is if this was your family member, how would you do it, what would you do? Yeah.
I think the panel voted on that, give
Yeah,
it a vote.
unanimously, where you get. But the flip side is we also have neither one of our largest blood suppliers in the country.
Yeah,
We take Vitalant and Red Cross, neither of them offer a 35-day CPDA1 product. So that restricts things right off the bat in terms of a lot of national integration of that part. The other one, I guess I'll stay on the dark side, I've been that way the whole, conference, is that while I appreciate our blood bankers starting to understand some of this, AAB understanding some of it, Eric actually explained this way back when at the first Whole Blood Academy I was at. It'll be really easy for EMS, you'll be chomping at the bit, surgeons in the hospital are gonna understand, and your blood banker is gonna be the slowest piece to come into line. And that's still the case, that they're taking first steps out of the blocks, which is good. But when we look at a lot of the negative responses in the sense that this won't work because of this isn't going to work, well, okay, what's the plan around that then? What's the workaround? EMS has many workarounds, surgery has many workarounds, we're not getting quite as many of that, how to solve the solution part when we look at the blood banking piece. They're making some progress, I don't take away from that. And in their world, as we said, that's, get them to move anything off that position is a little bit of a start, but it's got a ways to go.
so let me just take the next level, I guess, maybe I should even throw in my own comments. But one of the things is that I really came to appreciate is that we probably aren't gonna get whole blood on every ambulance, which is, would be the ideal, perfect world and all that. But, so what I wanna emphasize, what we could do today even, is think about applying, say, a dried plasma that could last 2 years in room temperature, but more importantly, maybe for right now, because we have it out there, is TXA, and actually not using necessarily the current things we have for giving blood, is that maybe expanding some of those criteria. That's why I like what Dr. Jenkins is trying to do, is expand some of those criteria so we can get it to more people that we can get. And you heard me say, I would want my family member to get the 2 grams or whatever, maybe it should be 3 grams, I don't know. But up front in that first half an hour, 45 minutes, and I'd probably be very wary about giving it after an hour, whether it's a survival bias or whatever, but that's where most of the complications have shown up. But I think we can do that, and we can do it more often for more people, is what I'm getting at. And I think that's what we currently should work on and think about. So I really like where Dr. Jenkins is going with respect to that. So one of the questions I was going to ask was about leukoreduction. So I was really glad you brought that up. So that's a good topic. So thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So then, I don't know, does anybody disagree with me what I was just saying about TXA, et cetera?
Yeah.
Does anybody disagree with me what I'm saying about maybe expanding, the criteria for what we use for TXA, et cetera? Anybody have I'm hearing you got a lot of no. I got a lot of shaking heads. No, you agree with me then? Okay, yeah, okay. All right, so that would be one immediate thing we can all be thinking about as a group here. So as we go through here.
Paul, I had one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
Shameless plug, if any of you guys, on the call are interested in coming to our Whole Blood Academy, we'll be doing a couple more this year. I think we have one in, September, October. We would ask that you bring everybody from the team, from your collaborative, so your blood banking people need to come, their administration, their medical director, their ops person, your pathologist, your transfusion medicine person from the hospital, a surgeon, the EMS medical director, the EMS chief or operations lead. Am I missing anybody else? I think that's it. So we can do 2 jurisdictions easily, and actually 3 jurisdictions, but that's about 10 people. It's 30 people if we have 3 jurisdictions at once. And the people who have come with half of that group have had to come back with the whole group and do it again. So if you can assemble that, and candidly, if someone comes and says, we have all our people, you're going to get preferential, you get in line first. So if you can assemble that group of people that are willing to come, and it's a 2-day thing, day and a half, and I like to call it a boot camp. Dave hated that. I was like, we're going to do the academy, but really it's you know why you want to do it. This is how you can do it. It's a way to do it. So
now let me switch gears a little bit. I wanted to say people who just, most people in this room have had relatively matured programs that they've been dealing with. Jeff, you're sort of in between that. You're not totally brand new, but you're starting some new programs, et cetera. And is there anything that you face, the problems that you face that are now better as you go on to your next? For example, you started in Oklahoma City, I believe, and you probably had some issues there. Now you're introducing to Tulsa. And is the obstructions less so because you had the experience, or what's your perspectives there?
Yeah, so I think you got to realize that when we're talking whole blood, we're not requisitioning a box of jelly donuts. There are appropriately significant steps that have to be taken in how that product is handled. I think, it's not jelly donuts, but it's not epinephrine either. I mean, there's just something a little different about it being a blood product. And so I think that is part of the learning curve that we have all had to take in EMS, that we're used to just saying, hey, let's make this thing happen. And in our minds, that should take 24 hours or less. This is not a 24-hour or less journey. And so even in systems that are up and running, there still are times where some of the logistics of paperwork, if you will, can be a bit more tricky or a bit more involved in the logistics of just getting coolers in, or, what units are you going to put the blood on. So we're still, we're working through that as we've taken a very successful program from Oklahoma City and moved it 80 miles northeast to Tulsa. The equipment is easy. Let's just buy more of what we know works. The training is pretty easy. Let's take the folks that did the training the first time around and have them do that again. And what do we need to change in the curriculum? Frankly, little to nothing. And so that piece is there. The holdup that we have found is working the contracts in parallel to, okay, this is what we're going to do with our frontline EMS personnel, typically supervisory paramedics, right, when I'm talking frontline. But what we're doing there is actually the easy part. The parallel part, which is the part that we don't have complete control over, hence maybe some frustration inherent in that, is we got to wait for the contracts to be signed between the blood bank and the EMS organizations. And in our particular system, it's more than just one organization, right? Because we have a separate ambulance service than the fire department. So now there's two contracts in and of itself. And
So you raise a good question, though, and let me interrupt you, because it's important for everybody to understand this. When you say contracts, that immediately means, you know, county or city attorneys, and that's the black hole that just sucks things up, right?
Right, and then there are contracts between those same governmental entities and the hospitals, and this is and the blood centers with the hospitals too. And so this is part of the responsible stewardship that we have been talking about at times, that we're not just taking this blood and carrying it for 21 days because we don't have access to the 35-day product either. And so we're not just taking it for 21 days. If we don't use it, you know, it unfortunately gets disposed of. Part of that stewardship plan is we're only going to carry it for 7 days or less, cycle it back to the Blood Institute, and then in turn, they're cycling it to the hospitals. And that's how, I mean, really appreciate what Don brought up earlier about how even with the experience in San Antonio, even with systems applying what is so graciously taught here in San Antonio, there is still often wastage in the teens to 20% from the get-go. Honest to goodness, we have had 0 units wasted. You know, you really want to drill down in the details on that. We had 1 unit that came to EMS. There was a question about what's floating in the blood. You know, what happened with temperature deregulation, and as we did a root cause analysis of that, it wound up just being a very high lipid containing sample. There was nothing wrong with the temperature carrying capacity. We had 1 blood unit very recently, just within the last few days, that somehow there was some physical damage to the bag itself. It wound up not being used. Those are the only 2 units that we have ever actually had physical control of in Oklahoma City that have not ultimately gone into a patient. And so the thing is, though, to achieve that parallel pathway of all these contracts so that the blood can go back and forth, it can be astounding how long those take. And I don't say that in criticism. I just say that maybe with some healthy respect, that what seems so simple to us, you know, there's probably a good reason why everyone is not carrying blood today, because if it was super easy, the paradox here would be that we would probably have folks getting blood that shouldn't get it, and we would be having some wastage that we shouldn't have.
So the bottom line is, I want everybody to appreciate the issue about the contracts. My experience with the contracts going into the black hole of the city attorney's office or whatever has been that they want existing models and be reassured that this is out there. So I think that's one of the things we could do with the folks who've been doing it for a while, and share with us or help us and establish that's it. So let's pitch it over to Don. What's your?
Yeah, I was gonna, you know, speak on some of the stuff that Jeff got to. I'm not gonna add to that. All I'm gonna say is that we realized, based upon that conversation we had, Jeff, that that's something that's lacking in the academy, and we need to bring in. And we're gonna get old academy folks who've been through this and have them give us samples of their contracts that they've worked out, so that we can help hopefully teach that into the future.
I mean,
it's a real new.
Usually we have a whole catalog of anybody that's been through.
Yeah.
Just have, here's 50 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I'll say about the fact that from the very first academy, it was very clear how important blood banking leaders were. I mean, you included them in the faculty. We wish we would have brought someone from our Blood Institute the first time, because that was the hesitancy and enthusiasm when we went back. However, part of this journey has been clearly within the blood banking world in their own conferences. This is starting to become not starting, but is a topic of increasing interest. And so when we sat down with them to try to convince them that we needed to be up and running, somehow that convincing had already occurred. And so that was really a nice serendipity, I think, of this. And so I really like your idea of bringing more of the contract piece into the awareness level, because I think that can
I think being a
streamline.
speaker is a great idea, because then they are forced to just not, you know.
So one of the other things I wanted to, is to throw on to what you were talking about there, is that in that blood banking world, they think differently about waste, right? So you presented two cases that would not qualify the blood bank side as waste. That's loss, right? It was damaged, there's something, right? What they talk about when they talk about waste is outdating. I didn't get the chance to use it, it expired, and I had to throw it away. And so there's a natural amount of loss that occurs from the time they try to put that needle in the patient's arm until it gets to the, its end date, that they accept, and we don't even hear about that kind of stuff.
I want to take one more quick tangent and have Eric actually show us a little bit about the system he set up here. You don't mind doing that? It's kind of a cool thing, yeah, right? So.
Yeah. So I was going to mention the reason we have our blood bank medical director, our blood center medical director, and the pathologist from University Hospital. If you bring your blood center people, now it's not you, the bang bang cowboy, trying to convince them that this is Greg Popovich trying to convince the librarians what to do. This is like fellow librarians saying, let me tell you how we did this. We were very concerned as well. And so that dialogue between Sam and Leslie Greben, who's the hospital pathologist, transfusion medicine, and that has been the one thing. Every time it's like the magic light bulb goes off when they start talking, either over lunch or over dinner or over the old-fashioned cart, which was a terrible mistake. But that was important. Our rotation system here, I think we talked about it earlier, has grown from 12 units on the helicopters to 20 units when we added San Antonio, and now we're at 56 units every day on a supervisor vehicle or an ambulance in the field across our region. We've started our Governor's EMS and Trauma Advisory Council system has started a whole blood, pre-hospital whole blood task force at the state level. I'm chairing that. Don Jenkins is the vice chair, CJ Winkler also vice chair, and Eric and others, it's like the two Erics at the meeting. We have great participation in that, and we really, when I talked to Peter about what you're doing in Florida, I think you're right. I think you mentioned having more statewide coalition efforts. That's definitely the way we're trying to go. And I think that's probably most people know about our rotation system.
So when I was talking about your system, I want to talk about what we're doing here, our AV system here you have here. That's what I wanted to talk about.
So I showed them, I found, I don't know, it's like 3 months ago, this continuity camera on the setting on your Mac, on the MacBook. And so we're using an iPhone, and I just turned it around, and so we've just kind of pivoting back and forth. But it has center stage and follows you around. It's been really cool.
Zoom in and out. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's doing all that on its own. I'm not even.
So I want to get from the audience. Are you guys able to hear us okay? Is this working out okay? Is it an interesting approach? Can you hear us all pretty well?
One head nod.
I've got one head nod anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
no, it's great, and I thought this was the OWL camera. It's been great how it's zooming in. I love it. So this has been one of the best.
Yeah, I just want you to be aware of it. It's kind of cool. So we need to do that too. I got to learn how to do this. It's very cool. All right. I want to do a couple of digressions here. I was originally going to talk about what we learned from Eagles last week. I don't know if we have enough time. We'll do it next week maybe. But one of the things I'd like to do is just take some of the audience members, like Candace, if you're out there, I want you to pipe in a little bit about, I'm going to ask you some specific questions about hospitals, okay, that end of the equation. Et cetera, and then maybe Dave Wittberg to say, hey, you just started your program, how long did it take, and what were the obstructions you were having, because you're one of our newest programs, okay?
And his amazing data tracking.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Yeah. So, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna go off and do this. Are you prepared for that? Candace, you've listened to the conversation today. What were the obstructions early on? You even had not only your hospital, I'm just saying other places, the surgeons were against it. I mean, we know some of the incidents where, you know, it was really obstructed, you know, that very much. But, how did that go? How did that transition take place? And is it just, and what were the components you think to get the hospitals on board with this? Because there were, and by the way, it's not just trauma surgery. There's OB, there's, you know, the internist and all that kind of thing to deal with, right? So.
Yes, so we started January of 2023 with whole blood at a trauma center. And with that, we started very conservative with, you know, men and women of non-childbearing age, and it was very tight in what we could do. And with our blood bankers getting involved and the Florida Whole Blood Coalition, listening to these calls, seeing the data emerge, seeing the transaction and what our pre-hospital providers are doing with whole blood really opened up that change. And so we now are giving whole blood to all ages, and that's really been successful. Our challenges with an exchange with pre-hospital is that we only have one blood provider for the Southeast United States, and their resources limited, and the way they have to transfer units in their systems is not really conducive to handing off responsibility to different agencies. So we're working with One Blood on what that looks like and building their system better so that they can format it for the entire state and the entire Southeast region that One Blood covers.
Okay.
I would say the buy-in is there. I would say an easy way to start for an exchange is the hospitals do also have wastage, and we cannot, with our blood provider, return our units so that they can spin them down. And we found that out is because the bags that they use to store the blood in would require only a 72-hour time frame for the whole blood to be sent back to the original blood center to spin it down for other products. So even in the trauma center, we have wastage, and the first start of just exchange is to give our expiring units to pre-hospital who can get it to the patient faster. So that's just been some of our latest experiences. Although we're working with One Blood, they are going to change their blood bags, and hopefully their new bags will allow some of that opportunity to turn whole blood into other products at a much later date.
And before I go over to Dave Vidberg, I'm going to ask John Jew, because I think you haven't got your program rolling out yet, but close to it. I want to see, again, what issues you guys faced and what lessons you learned from here today, maybe even. But I do want to have one quick mention. We had a whole thing about community. One of the things we did at Eagles last week, for example, were to talk about the elderly. It's a growing population. It's going to explode in the next, you know, whatever you define as elderly. Okay, usually that's someone who's 15 years older than you, right? But the elderly being over 70, 75, that population is increasing, it's fall risk and all that kind of thing. They're on anticoagulation. So that was one issue that we talked about and brought up, that we have to be prepared for that. But the other thing was the issues of people who are like the community out there, if it's Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever. Can you address some of those issues for me?
Yeah, so when we started our whole blood program, we actually invited the elders into the office. And this is an incredible community.
Yeah.
They are so they explained to us their religious interpretations and how they address that. And everyone thinks that the Jehovah's Witness population is a big problem. It really isn't. The teachings of the church are that it's up to the individual's beliefs and interpretation of the teachings, whether they get whole blood or not. Most of them don't. And the other thing that was brought up is that if, say, they're unconscious and we don't know, and you didn't get the card out of their wallet in time, they're not going to be relegated to damnation in regard to their religion. It's a conscious decision not to get whole blood. And we have had providers. That's another thing. You're going to have providers in your organization that may be of Jehovah's Witness. And it's okay to deliver the blood. It's okay to be a part of the resuscitation. And some providers may even give blood, but there may be some objections. And you have to allow that within your workforce to have a plan B, where maybe they just deliver the package and the medics and the ambulance give the blood. But you have to have the conversation.
There was one interesting conversation that came up that I didn't anticipate, where they said that there are some systems where they were, they thought they had liability in giving the blood in case it's HIV or something else and delivering. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the liability issue in our system is extremely low. There are cases, it's rare, in 1,500 units of blood that we've had 2 incidents where our blood supplier said, hey, we got a problem with a bag of blood we sold you, and you need to talk to the patient. So the issue is the person who gives the blood, the blood transfuser, is responsible for that notification of the patient in collaboration with the medical team. And in our case, it would end up being a false positive hepatitis issue. But we did have the conversation with the patient. We got confirmation testing, and in fact, it ended up being okay. But that is an extremely rare event. But you have to have policy for it. Who's going to talk to the patient? How's it going to happen? And work with your blood bank in your hospital to make sure that's communicated.
So let me pitch this over to Dr. Jenkins. So I brought up the issue about the elderly who are often on some kind of anticoagulant or aspirin or whatever it is. Are they people we should be more aggressive about giving this to, or less aggressive, or what's the pros and cons, or are there any issues, or we just treat them like everybody else?
Yeah, I don't think it's an age factor. It's a cardiovascular overload issue. Be that a small child, be that somebody with congestive failure. When those older patients bleed, they have the same physiology as the rest of us. May not be reflected in their vital signs because of their ability to respond based on medications that might be taken. But we don't treat kids different than we treat elderly adults in terms of they need a transfusion, they're getting a transfusion.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And
but
think about it.
Just be aware that they may not present the typical shock.
Absolutely correct.
Right. This is 355 milliliters. A bag of blood is around 500 milligrams. So 1.5 Dr. Peppers is what you're given when you give a bag of blood. It's okay. And if you're a 25 kilo Izzy, it's 27 kilos. 27 kilos, 10 per kilo. A bag of blood is 2 boluses, and that's half. That's not even there to 40 cc's per kilo, where we get into massive transfusion. The point is, you can't kill a kid with a bag of blood. You can't.
Before, I was going to bring up things about calcium and various other, but I think in view of time, let's just make that for future future meetings. But what I do want to quickly go to David Wittberg and just give us a quick update on, and I mean real quick because we got other people to get to, but mostly what were the issues you faced? Did it take a long time to get this done, or were you flying on the the shoulders of giants who had already started these things?
Took 6 months from starting to launching. I'll tell you that with regard to contract and procurement, having a friend that's a mayor or a legislator is a great thing, especially when you're in an urban center and there's murder and bad things happening. Don't underestimate the early involvement of a legislative partner to be your champion, and that's what we did with our mayor's office. They have deputies that oversee contract and procurement and will help you move things forward. Challenges we're facing right now.
Just real quick, there was an interesting anecdote where yesterday from Charlie Coyle in Palm Beach County, where they wanted to get new positions way out in the west side of the county, and it was questioned by the county manager and said, well, are they going to be able to deliver blood? And that was so they had gotten such success from that they used it for that reason. It's kind of funny that, he was able to get the positions created, the chief, because of that. So David, where were your major hurdles that you had?
So challenges right now. Yeah, so I made a quick list of challenges. Challenge number 1, gut feeling by the paramedic transfusionist that, hey, my patient's dying, they need blood, versus strict inclusion criteria, hemodynamic criteria. I'm finding a lot of them are pulling the trigger based on a gut feeling, which isn't a bad idea because we don't typically check vital signs before we slap on a tourniquet and perform a life-saving intervention. We do PMAX, potentially missed administration cases. We set up search filters. to look for potential misses, and there are a lot. The key thing is that feedback has to be given very tactfully so as to not make your transfusionist become gun shy when a patient really needs it. One of the biggest challenges right now are how we're educating our receiving hospitals. So we don't always transport to a trauma center. Some of our hospitals are divided between kind of a trauma reception area and a main ED kind of medical side. And I find the medical side doesn't have as much experience. And, the nurses need help, and we often have to call the trauma nurses over to help the ED side. So we have to make sure that we could have done a better job at the inception of this program with more uniform education of our hospitals in our district. The other major challenge is provision of analgesia. That we're keeping track of all the other skills that are being performed or missed when patients are being transfused. And we're finding that a lot of patients with high pain scores are not getting any analgesia whatsoever. So that's why I recommended to Mark Peel to ketamine coat the syringe and the life flow and kill two birds with one stone. And then the last thing I'll finish with is, should we even continue transfusing any patients found in traumatic cardiac arrest? Our protocol allows for inclusion of transfusion for patients in TCA less than 5 minutes, with the provision of care happening during those 5 minutes. I'm almost afraid to say CPR, but CPR for, we're thinking about maybe removing those patients, but not sure where we're going to go. The last thing I'll say with regard to wastage, all you need to do to minimize waste is have more people shot and stabbed wherever you live. We have no problem with wastage because we go through blood quickly. Our average shelf life of transfused blood is around 9 to 10 days. But I would say a serious comment that we keep talking about in this conversation about recirculation to hospitals. And I think those that were Eagles and heard my presentation about our use of GIS, I think we need to think about recirculation more perhaps within our regional systems, diversion of blood product not being utilized in regional systems, state or multi-state regional systems, flowing units of blood around the 10 to 15 day marker to urban centers where they're more likely to be utilized as another way to minimize waste outside of recirculation to hospitals.
Yeah. Right. Well, listen, those are fantastic comments. I am going to have to cut you off, but one comment I will make is that CJ Winkler and I have been really saying that we don't use the term traumatic cardiac arrest, which unless you say that person is truly, the heart is not beating. And we are actually saying terms like it's post-traumatic circulatory arrest that we have to identify first, which could be a cardiac arrest, but a lot of times it may be a heart that is already beating or just can't get through the tension pneumothorax or whatever, but it's still probably for the next 5 or 10 minutes may still be viable. And so we just make that difference, whereas the cardiac arrest is truly a cardiac arrest, and most of us agree if they're in that pulseless state, if we have an ultrasound on or whatever it might be, that, they're probably maybe we shouldn't use the blood there, et cetera. And those are things we want to study further and look at and make sure there is not that one person who's an exception to the rule. Let's pitch over to Don then.
Yeah, so one comment to answer a problem you encountered. When you take the patient to the uninitiated hospital. We had that very early in the program.
Yeah.
And what we decided to do is we created a script that was a frequently asked questions script, and then we made a video of those questions and answers, so depending upon how the user wants to view the material. But we gave laminated cards to all of the medics out there. And if they were taking the patient to the uninitiated hospital, here's the card, these are the people you call, here's the QR code, get on there and see it for yourself. They're going to answer every question you have that I can't answer for you. Sorry, your patient's alive, keep going.
All right. Let me jump over to John Jew, because John, you're getting ready to start a program, or you did start a program. Whereabouts are you, and what's the issues there?
Yeah, Paul, can you hear me?
And John's from Portland, by the way. Those who didn't know, David's from Washington, D.C., right? And that's why I've got so many gunshot wounds and all that.
Yeah.
But go ahead. John, go ahead. Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, Paul, I just want to check my audio. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. And we can even see your white earphones as well.
Yeah. So anyway, we are very close to launching right now, probably in the third or fourth quarter. So we basically, our EMS system developed the concept of deploying blood. Our overall goal was to actually have blood on our EMS system. Our EMS system is fire, first response, and they're all ALS and EMS transport, which in this case was AMR. the first thing I think we did correctly was a coalition building. We actually went to our trauma surgeons, who, by the way, most of them are military. So that was really not a problem. Was really not a problem to us. The second thing, which was really a surprise, is we went to our blood bank, which is the OHSU blood bank, and we expected a lot of pushback. And all of a sudden, looking at Randy right now, said, "Yeah, we're on board." I said, we almost fell out of our chair with that. And the other one was that we went to our hospital leadership, and this is very similar to Stein, and they said, well, we have a funding problem. We don't have it within our budget. And would you guys be willing to basically fund a pilot project? And said, what's the numbers? And after some discussion, they said yes, because we're going to save blood from the patients that we receive. Does that make sense as well? So we actually solved the funding
Can I
problem.
interrupt you? Let me try to understand your point. Now, you're saying that if you get blood in the field, you find later you'll need less transfusions in hospital. Is that what you're saying? I wasn't quite following.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And so it's a cost effectiveness for the trauma hospital. The third we went to is our OB and our pediatric colleagues, and they said yes and yes. Okay, and there was also surprising here as well. The other thing we went to is we have 2 level 1 trauma centers, OHSU and Emmanuel Hospital. And it turns out that Emmanuel Hospital is from a different source than a blood bank. They don't have fresh whole blood in their ER. And he said, are you okay with us bringing blood? He said, in fact, we would like to have you bring whole blood for us, but we don't have that right now here as well. So we're working our way through that. And then finally, we actually went to Seattle King County, spent a whole day, our whole team, and we learned a lot from Seattle King County from an operation point of view. We looked at our data, and we basically formed a concept. What we didn't discuss was our FAR union. They had some, I would say, education, and they said, "Is this a complicated procedure? Was it? Do we need to get an extra 5%?" to administer whole blood, and that required some conversation here as well. But honestly, we're at the equipment acquisition stage, and after that, we will launch as well. So that's where we're really at.
So the surprising thing here is the blood bank being so accommodating, and I'm wondering, and this is going to be posing to you guys here, is the kind of the word getting out amongst themselves and talking to each other, and it's now just finally snowing, huh?
It's in Nebraska, so a team brought me in to talk to Omaha, Nebraska, and they were we're not going to do this. And by the time we got done talking with the blood banker and overwhelming him with policies and data, he said, well, why don't we just provide you guys the blood?
So interesting.
Well, one of the people that was on the pre-hospital guidance group was from Portland, a blood banker. And so that may have had something to do with it. They,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, this is for Randy. We went to Seattle King County, and we actually spent about an hour talking to their blood bank people, and they said, we know the people in Portland. We'll actually call her. It's like, fine. It's like, we actually trained with her as well. So you guys are just as good as we are talking to each other as well. Yeah.
And they may have their own R&D program like we have, right?
Yeah.
Rip off and duplicate.
They do, because I'm sending policies for all over the country, blood banker to blood banker.
That's good.
I think they're a little bit like the BlackBerry CEO. They figured out maybe adapt or die. Like we're gonna move the bar, and they either need to figure it out, and they are. They do seem to be more receptive.
Well, overall, I mean, we're down the last 4 minutes for our meeting, and then next week I do hope to have 2 things being done. One is getting that report from Kevin Mackey and the others at the National Registry, and we'll do that. But also want to see, why don't you be thinking about and maybe going through your programs and say, what did I learn last week at the Eagles? What was the things that we took home? That session we had at the very end with the 25 Eagles still left there, and didn't have problems getting in with flights and all that, and talking to the audience was extraordinary, right? I mean, you were there, Eric, right? So it was not only the kumbaya feeling of the whole thing, but them telling us what they learned from the meeting was really rewarding for us, that they're going to change things on Monday, that kind of thing. It was just exciting, and just like this thing here, that's why I was asking you guys, what are you going to change on Monday, for the folks that are in the audience, are going to be a lot, I think. And, so really glad to, and this was really good. I wanted to thank Eric again for setting this thing up, and, it was kind of fun that we're all here together and reflecting on yesterday, because it's the same kind of thing. We had a really good vibe from yesterday. It was really fun. So we'll do the same thing about Eagles next week. So think about things that were there that you learned for, especially the first timers, you know, like Gail and sorry, David, you couldn't stay the whole time and all that. And Libby Char, what hour is it out there in Hawaii?
Oh, it's getting late now. It's almost 7 a.m.
You always get up at Ozark Theater for us, and we really appreciate your loyalty here. I always have to ask what's happening in New York City, right? Anything new, Glenn, that you're going through up there?
No, you know, luckily nothing major except the heat for us, like most of the country now.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Hey, so just stay cool, right? That's right. And the 3 L's, lightweight, liquid. I'm just being joking here. All right, so, and anybody else want to ask any questions or pipe in or make any comments before I go off the air here? Not. I just want to say welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends next Friday. Thanks as usual. I thought this was great. I learned a lot. And any comments out of Baltimore, either Jenny or is the boss there by any chance? You there, Jen? I just see, it just says here, Baltimore Fire Department, that's why, so.
No, we're all here.
If not, oh, you are, okay, good, okay, just had to switch over. Any comments or anything you could add to this conversation we had today? Did you take anything away from today?
You know, always look, it's always good to hear Dave Wittberg teach me something new, you know, and it's always good following his lead and establishing the path. So I have to say it's great. It's routine. It's sad because we recently had an enhancement in the budget that was denied. Quite frankly, the city denied our enhancement to pay for blood. So we still are, we don't have the justification problem with trauma. We have it for getting it funded. So I'm looping back to some of the shock trauma colleagues and everything else to see if we can make the imperative a little bit more. But I think one of the things this group does, and I've said it so often, is, you know, we make the impossible possible here. So it's really great to see how we can troubleshoot. And I think we have a lot of information, but, you know, in our jurisdiction, it really comes down to funding and awareness and not logistics, because a testament to this group's work, we've done a lot of that.
All right, thanks, Ben. All right, good. And anything new to add out of Baltimore? Is the port up and running now?
It is up and running. We've done, I don't know, about 166 successful tele 911 consults since April, but that's about it coming out this jurisdiction. We likely will be starting on some diversion for substance use, but that's up and coming. More to follow.
All right, got it. Okay, got it. And Mark,
Thank you, Paul.
sorry we missed. Yeah. And Mark, sorry we missed you. So it was a lot of challenges for a lot of people to get in, but
Yes, sir.
I'm going to order no storms next year. Okay, just so you know, so we don't have any delays on people getting in. It was odd though, because usually our storm system down there is not until, you know, August, September, and to have something like that happen in June was bizarre. So I don't know if that's going to be a trend for the future for all of us, or it was just a weird year. That's all.
I enjoyed my extra day in Miami.
You did.
The airport.
At the airport.
I saw some stuff in the chat there, Paul.
Oh, what was in the chat? I'm sorry. What did I
Looked like
see?
there were a number of,
Great discussion, or, let's see, I'm only seeing, let's see, right over here. David had to run from Canada, hoping to catch up with the Trailblazers here in the US. Have to break off, thanks for the info. Yeah, a lot of people had to be off today. Someone had I had 2 people with their wife in the emergency department, or a husband in another case. And then I had, Corey was fighting with the Social Security office, they had to go down there. And so there was some, I guess these interesting text or emails, you know, before the meeting, people apologize they can't be on, which is like, yeah, we're here to serve you. You don't have to apologize to us, you know, that kind of thing. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and break off. Anything else you guys want to add as a final closing?
thanks.
This is fantastic, and just, it's great because it's actually I love being in person with the people we often have on the Zoom, and it's kind of fun to be all together here today, sharing our experiences.
And Tevi, enjoy camp.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Hey, there's no entitled people there.
I'm in the cafeteria now.
Peter, tell them a little bit about what happened during. Yeah? Huh? Peter, tell them a little bit during COVID. Go ahead.
Oh,
Say
during COVID, yeah, we set up an entire COVID lab here a couple years back, but, I don't come out there, I can't really hear you guys, but just wanted to ask you a group session.
Well, we'll have
Hopefully
you
soon.
tell this, we'll do it some other time. We'll have you give us, tales from the camp, okay? All right, thanks, Peter, for, being on with us, et cetera. Charlie did a fantastic job, by the way, just want you to know, okay? So. All righty, well, that's it then, everyone. I'm gonna sign off, okay? Take care. See you back next week. Take care.